Welcome to 502 Conversations. I'm Brian Kirby. My guest today is psychology professor Sheldon Helms. Sheldon is an you're a professor of experimental psychology, not an experimental psychology professor. They mean very different things, right?
They can.
At Ohlone University.
Ohlone College.
Ohlone College.
Yes.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And there's a specific reason you're here. You are a college professor, tenured, all-American kind of guy, right?
I'd say so.
Except you have one special interest, which is you are trying to work against...
Gay conversion therapy.
So how long have you been a psychology professor?
About 23 years. I have spent about 18 of that at Ohlone College.
And you have a PhD in experimental psychology? Is that what they call it?
No, I have a master's degree in general psychology, but I was hired to teach experimental, so.
Oh, okay. And psychology, you can do that like a musician teacher can teach multiple instruments?
Yeah, it depends on what your area of specialty is and where you're teaching, but whatever they need, then you end up teaching that, yeah.
And it's interesting that you're a psychology teacher because of the conversation we're about to have about gay conversion therapy, because I'm going to say something that might offend people, but whose business is it is kind of a psychology problem. Why would you make that your concern if it doesn't affect you? It's kind of like, why do you need to help rule the world? I'm sure that's kind of a psychology problem, right?
Well, why should we care? Is that
No,
what you're asking?
No. Why should someone else care?
Whether you're gay.
Right. And
that's a much more complicated question.
It's a psychology question, though, I assume. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I'm sure you have noticed this, but the word homophobe starts with homo. Mm. And I have noticed in several cases that maybe this isn't representative, but some of the most outspoken homophobes and televangelists eventually get caught in a hotel with a teenage male prostitute. I'm not going to say that's 100%, but the story is a familiar one to us all.
Yeah. Scratch a homophobe, find a queer. Basically. Yeah, there is that problem. I don't know if it's necessarily always true, but it does seem particularly hypocritical when that happens, doesn't it? Yeah, it's almost...
And the excuses are wild, too. Like, oh, I'm not really homosexual. I was taking a lot of cocaine. So that makes it okay.
Yeah, I've had a lot of cocaine, but no, I haven't. Yeah, it's a strange, I think, multi-layered phenomenon. I was just talking to Susan Blackmore downstairs, and she was saying that there's a theory. She was trying to explain it to us in a simple fashion for those of us who hadn't seen the talk that she was referring to, but it was about how multi-layered hypocrisy can be, and how a person who is a con artist may actually find himself going out and fighting against con artistry, and therefore his internal battle with his guilt over being a con artist is being battled not only within but without. So when those two things match up, it's not a hypocrisy. So I'm sure it's
not a hypocrisy.
Right.
They cancel each other out?
No, it's not that they cancel each other out. It's that they're consistent because he hates that within himself as well as in other people.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So even though he may be living a life that seems hypocritical on the surface, deep down he's not hypocritical because he's hating the con artist within himself and the con artist in you if you're a con artist.
Oh, okay.
So that may be a little too philosophical for someone who teaches psychology to explain in an interview, but I think it's complicated. But it does. I get upset with people who are gay and are homophobes. I get much more upset with psychologists and psychiatrists who are homophobes because I think those people should know better. There are really two fronts for this. In my talk, I show two books. One of them is the Holy Bible.
Oh, wait, let's talk about what we're about to talk. We got off to kind of a jovial beginning.
Okay.
But we're talking about a serious subject, gay conversion therapy. And this is mostly foisted upon younger people, I'm assuming. Okay.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that psychologists and psychiatrists wouldn't know better because that's an odd statement, I think.
Well,
so
they're fringe people. They're fringe.
Okay. All right. So they're not really taken seriously then. I hope I don't hurt anybody's, I don't care if I hurt anybody's feelings or not, but okay. If there's some homophobic psychology professor that takes issue with that, they can contact me.
They can contact me.
So gay conversion therapy, what? It doesn't make sense on a fundamental level, only because I'm not gay, no offense, but you'd be hard-pressed to convert me to being gay. It's just...
And by that same extension of thought, you'd be hard-pressed to make a gay person straight.
Right, that's what I
mean. And the evidence suggests that you can't do that. What you can do, however, is raise that gay or lesbian person or trans person, because now they're also jumping on that bandwagon and torturing trans people as well.
And you mean that literally, by the way, torturing?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah. We know that this drives people to suicide.
Okay, go on.
We also know that over nearly 700,000 Americans have gone through this. Yes, we're not talking about a few. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have gone through this in American history. And those are just the ones we know of. And we know that 20,000 of those this year alone will be youth, ages 17 and under. We also know that, as I was saying, it's two fronts. Some of it's religious and some of it's not religious. The ones that are religious, I don't have as much of a visceral reaction to them. I'm not a religious person, I'm an atheist, and so I can be more rational in my approach to that kind of insanity. The ones who go to real colleges, get real degrees in psychology, and still go out and do this, that I really have a hard time with.
Oh, okay.
And there are hundreds of them.
Hundreds?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of college-educated psychology or psychiatrists that think this is some kind of mental health issue and there's treatment for it.
Worse than that, there are hundreds of organizations that have dozens or hundreds of psychologists and psychiatrists working within them.
I don't want to get too much off track here, but I have to because we're having a conversation and I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's no professional standard. In other words, if you were a neurosurgeon and you had a degree and all the way through and your specialty was neurosurgeon, and then you became, you know what, all this medicine stuff and interfering with the body and cutting into the body, that's crap. I can do phrenology. There's a standard there that there's a line that person has crossed.
Right.
If you've gotten this degree in psychology or psychiatry, there's no professional organization that comes down and says, you crossed the line here. You are no longer a member of
So far, they haven't done that.
Does my question make sense, though?
It does, yes. The furthest that the American Psychological Association has gone is a policy statement, which suggests that people not do this.
And those are harsh words.
I'm telling you, for the APA, it really is. There's also the American Psychiatric Association, which psychiatrists, as I'm sure you know, are medical doctors.
Yes.
So they work under the auspices of the other APA. There are also a few laws across the country, and people are constantly emailing me and saying, isn't this great that our state just banned gay conversion therapy? And I look at it, and every single one of these so-called bans is the same thing. It's boilerplate. It only applies to licensed professionals within the state, which leaves out huge swaths of priests, rabbis, you know, some schmuck down the street who hangs up a shingle and says he can convert gay people. As long as they're not working under the auspices of a medical or a psychological association or something that the state licenses you to do, like if you're an MFT, a marriage family therapist, you can do it to anyone. And the ones that apply to the professionals are only for those 18 and younger. So if you're an adult, even they can still do it to you. So these are not bans, these are stopgap measures. What we need is a federal ban across all 50 states that says you cannot drive people to suicide.
So it's almost like alternative medicine in a way. I can hang out a shingle and proclaim myself a gay conversion therapy expert?
Yes.
Odd. All right, now let's talk about what is gay conversion therapy. I don't know if it's many different brands, but there has to be some underlying theme here. First of all, you need a gay person.
You start with a gay person, add water. No, you...
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be jovial, but the concept is beyond belief in a way.
When I give my talk, I work very hard to keep equal parts serious facts and also let's have a little fun and laugh a little. And I don't think there's a problem with that. Laughing and learning can happen at the same time. Derision, I draw the line at, of course. But if you don't laugh, you'll go crazy. I think it was Carrie Fisher who talked in her book, Wishful Drinking and Shockaholic, about her own mental illness. And a lot of people came out of the woodwork and said, how dare you? How dare you try to make this funny? And she said, look, if my life weren't funny, it would just be true, and that's unacceptable. And I think that's a great line. That's a great comeback. So I don't take offense at all at you popping in the occasional joke from time to time. What it usually means is that the message has gotten through to you and you're trying to find a way to sort of bring yourself back to the living.
Yeah, right. It's just so, it's such a oxymoron, I guess. It's so bizarre.
So you asked me earlier, what is gay conversion
conversion
therapy?
therapy?
So it goes under numerous names. It started with gay conversion therapy, and then it became things like reparative therapy. And my favorite one is SOCI, which is an acronym. It stands for Sexual Orientation Change Efforts. Whatever the name, it's a group of quasi-religious and quasi-therapeutic practices designed to make gay people straight.
And is this a course you take like prepping for the SAT, or?
If it were
I'm just saying,
real,
what
it
the
might be
hell?
well organized, right?
Oh,
And you
okay.
might have some rubric to go by.
Oh, so it's a free-for-all?
As you go from organization to organization, each of them claims to have found the perfect sort of 12-step method to cure you. So if you want some examples.
Let me just stop you right there, though. They're starting with the basic assumption that there's something wrong with you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So with the Bible, it tells you very plainly in numerous sections, in the Old and New Testament, by the way. Some people will tell you, well, Jesus came and it washed it all clean. But there are sections in Corinthians and other places where they also talk about gay people not being okay. So, the Bible is one area where people get that message. The culture is the other. We live in a very homophobic society, even today in the 21st century. If you watch TV shows, you don't see a lot of gay people, and when you do, they're kind of spotlighted, or they're kind of like there as a fixture of oddity, or a, hey, I have lots of gay friends kind of thing. It's getting better, don't get me wrong, but still, when you look at the number of gay men who are involved in theater across the country, learning to be actors, and then the paltry number that actually become superstars in Hollywood, something's off there. Because we should have mostly gay men in Hollywood movies, not a couple. So we've got something wrong in our society that teaches people from the ground up that heterosexuality is the thing. So it's not just someone sitting you down and telling you, here's what's wrong with you. We tell ourselves that every day. There's an assumption that when you have a son, he's going to marry a woman, and when you have a daughter, she's going to marry a man. People just live their lives that way, and as long as we do, we're sending the message that it's not okay to be gay.
Let me ask you one question there. We're starting, I don't know if this is a Bayesian question or not, but it is a probability question. We're starting with hundreds and thousands of men that are actors that are gay, but the superstars end up being heterosexual.
And they play the gays in the movies.
Okay, but it doesn't seem to make sense that only the heterosexuals are getting to the superstardom. It seems to more make sense that they're playing heterosexuals at the top. If they are gay, there must be gay superstars, and they don't come out. Or
There's
something.
a conspiracy theory I hadn't considered.
It's not a conspiracy theory because there are. I've done musical theater myself in the pit band, and there are the male. What do they call it? The male section of there's a word for it, but the females and the males are gay, a lot of them. How do you get to the top? Is this a Hollywood thing where they only promote heterosexuals?
Well,
I'm
sure,
just assuming
that's a vaulted position to become a Hollywood superstar. There's only a handful of them any time, right?
I just kind of assumed that
you just assumed they're gay.
No, I didn't assume they were gay, but I just assumed that they may be gay and not talk about it, or I just didn't. Just because you go to the Oscars with a woman on your arm doesn't mean anything, right?
So now you're thinking like a gay man.
Am I? I'm sorry. Am I being
He's hot. He's got to be gay.
No, I don't. I didn't say I found him attractive or not. I just kind of assumed that was. I'm not saying everybody is gay. I'm just saying with prior probabilities, there have to be some gay superstars.
There are some, but even okay. Then
Jeez, I hope I didn't hash myself up there.
We'll change the subject a little bit. Then we live in a homophobic society. If you have to pretend to be straight to become a Hollywood superstar.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. So there's one that's maybe a little easier pill to swallow. So, my larger point, of course, was that no one has to sit you down and teach you to be a homophobe or to teach you to hate the gayness within you. You pick that up on your own living in our society. And it's not as bad as many places in the world where they're throwing you off of buildings and things, like in the Middle East. But still, it's not a fun time growing up gay in America.
And you brought up the religious part of it. There's a religious teaching that tells you it's bad. And then there's just some kind of gayness is bad thought pattern, a visceral reaction to it for heterosexuals? That's just part of psychology? I mean,
where do the psychologists and psychiatrists get their ideas?
Yeah, right.
Freud, Jung, and Adler.
Oh, okay.
The big three, as they like to call them. And one of my favorite people to hate on, he's no longer with us, thank God, is a guy named Joseph Nicolosi, who was the founder of NARTH, the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality. And it was a very successful, probably still is a very successful gay conversion therapy organization that's only psychologists and psychiatrists. So they're taken very seriously because they're not in that way biased by their religion, supposedly. I have a feeling there's a thread of religion running through it. But Nicolosi liked to say, look, the three bigs, Freud, Jung, and Adler, all believed that homosexuality was unnatural and a form of mental illness. And he said, well, why did we change? The reason we changed was because a guy named Robert Spitzer, who was the chairman of the task force of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, our Bible in psychology. In 1973, he made a decision to take homosexuality out of the DSM, which is the book that defines mental illness. Nicolosi claimed that was a political decision. He said he didn't do any research, he didn't look at any research. Well, that's nonsense. He did actually look at the research by a lot of different people throughout the years that shows that there really is no correlation between homosexuality and mental illness. The reason that people thought so is because the people who come to them tend to have mental illness. And so if they come to them and they are homosexual, they would notice and say, wow, all these people who come to us who are gay, they're really messed up. What about all the gays out there that don't come to you?
Right, they're getting a skewed sample size.
Exactly right.
If you're a psychiatrist, you think everybody's crazy because that's all you see.
Yeah.
I mean, all the policemen are crazy. All the sanitation workers are crazy.
Thank you. So, but they only seem to notice it in gays.
And they don't know they're dealing with a skewed sample size? They're smarter than that, too.
Well, real psychologists and psychiatrists do, but these fringe people apparently don't. And there's another larger problem with that is that the appeal to authority. Just because these big names thought something 100 years ago, it's an appeal to antiquity as well, right? Because it was long ago, it must be true. Well, most people don't accept things that Freud, Jung, and Adler had to say. You know, let's not get into the Oedipal complex and penis envy and all that, which were Freudian ideas, or the kind of psychedelic Freudian ideas of Jung. Most people don't buy into that stuff. So just because someone that was respected a long time ago said something doesn't make it true. That's not how science works. That's not how the science of human behavior works.
All right, so let's get specific now. Talk me through some gay conversion therapy. But don't make me gay.
Okay. Well, we're not going to convert you that direction. So the...
I mean, what are they thinking? What's the method? They have to have some kind of method.
The old-fashioned one is pray the gay away. So they
get in a circle and pray around the gay person?
Yeah, you pray on your own, you pray in groups, group therapy kind of stuff.
And then they go to their priest and say, I'm sorry, I slipped, and the priest says, it's okay, my son, we all do.
Exactly. You're really hitting the nail on the head.
I'm sorry.
Then there's the more complex ones where they get into retreats, and these retreats are bizarre. First of all, they're all male retreats, which seems counterintuitive at best when you think about it.
Are they run by previously converted people that are setting
mostly
a good example?
they call themselves ex-gays, and mostly it's ex-gays running these things. They're surprisingly theater-like and flamboyant, the ones that I've seen. They're very kind of, you feel like you're off in the wilderness or whatever playing with your gay friends, kind of. They also do something called language therapy, where they teach you to call your male friends bro and dude, and to use masculine behaviors with them.
So appropriate male behavior?
Exactly.
Slapping on the back.
So
good job, Joe.
And playing sports, you know, contact sports and things like that. Which
we got shirts and skins.
Yeah, I'm not sure you really want to go the contact way, but they do. And you know, they're just kind of ridiculous when you and I look at them from the outside. But I always remind people that.
Let me ask though, for the free time, did they watch Chips and Batman and Robin?
I don't know. Very masculine stuff, seemingly. Right. Yeah, in tights.
Well, those CHP uniforms back in the...
they were pretty skin tight, too.
Okay,
you're right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Poncherelli, right?
Yeah, but those guys were out there, good cops. Okay.
And they always got the girl at the end, right? Yeah. Well, you know,
so sorry.
It's silly from the outside, but then you can really get kind of morose and when you start to think that these are very devoutly religious people. They believe there's a God, and they believe the God doesn't love them. And that the only way they can get into heaven is if they fix this immoral part of themselves. So you'll often hear people say things like, love the sinner, hate the sin. So they feel like they're helping people. But if you look at the actual statistics, there's no evidence whatsoever that people change their sexual orientation. Michael Bussey started Exodus International in the early 1970s. He quickly broke off from it, but the monster had already been given life, and it continued on without him for decades. He did his best to fight against it. Exodus was the largest ex-gay Christian organization in the world. They operated in 17 countries, at 120 ministries around the world. They brought in millions of dollars. It could not be stopped once that machine got started.
And this is all based on converting gays?
All of it, yeah. They made a lot of money doing it. But they believed they were saving souls. And once you get metaphysics into it, you have to throw out logic and reason.
Well, the only thing I can say about the morose part is that, I mean, if you literally believe that there is a creator of the universe and that he can do anything he wants to you if you don't do what he tells you, it's rational to act the way they want you to, if you really believe it.
Maybe so.
Based on the money aspect that you're talking about, I can't help but wonder if there are some people that just know this is a money-making machine and they're not sincere, but we can't go there.
Yeah, maybe on some level. We don't know. You know, Peter Popoff was a faith healer.
Oh, he was a complete fraud.
He was
he
complete
knew it was
fraud, you know. He wasn't a shut-eye, as they say.
Yeah,
Shut-eyes
yeah.
believe their own bullshit. But I'm sorry, can I cuss on this?
I guess so.
Okay. And, you know, I don't think he was a shut-eye at all. I think some of these people might inhabit that gray area of being a shut-eye and really thinking that they're heterosexual. Michael Bussey was asked some 30 years later, did you ever actually see anyone turn straight? And he said, not one. Not a single person in his entire history with the largest ex-gay organization in the world. He said, what I saw, though, was people becoming less interested in sex. They were becoming kind of closed off from parts of themselves. And they also got depressed.
Great.
And that's where we in the psychiatric and psychological communities really get involved, because we think it's one thing for you to go around telling people that they're sinning. That's kind of what brings the money into churches anyway, right? But if you tell people that there's something broken about them and that they're going to hell, you're really playing with fire, because we have very good evidence that gay people, gay teens in particular, are 5 to 8 times more likely to kill themselves than teenagers who are heterosexual. That increases even more dramatically when they come from communities and families that are gay-hating. So we're talking about doing something that makes people depressed in a group that's already prone to suicide.
All right. We've talked about the gay camping in the woods conversion therapy. That's
Yeah.
one form. There
Yeah.
are rather unpleasant, torturous forms.
Right.
Do you mind? Because this has to be spoken about.
Yeah.
And this is something you can, as a parent, if you think your son, it's mostly male, right?
Mostly males.
If you think your son is gay, you can find a gay conversion immersion 2-week thing out of the country or in the country and send them off and kind of wash your hands of it. This is not a good thing, and please tell me what's going on.
Some of them are relatively innocuous. They include things like giving Ipecac to a person, which is a poison control liquid.
That's innocuous?
Well, compared to some of the things I'm going to tell you about, yes, it makes you vomit violently. So they'll try, it's called aversion therapy. They will show you images. If the image is of a woman, they do nothing. If the image is of 2 men, whether intimate or not, they will give you Ipecac. This causes you to start vomiting while you're looking at those images. And the association gets built between images of men being intimate with each other, sometimes even just putting their arm around each other or hugging or shaking hands or something, and the feeling of nausea.
So there goes some kind of Pavlovian
Exactly
behavior
right,
response.
yes. And of course, it doesn't last. There's not much effect, but it does, the effect doesn't last. It makes you very, very sick, and it can cause people to have traumatic memories, flashbacks, but it doesn't change your sexual orientation. I would imagine probably it would make you less interested in sex for a while, though. You know, because if you're seeing anything that seems even quasi-intimate or sexual, along with nausea, it may for a while make you feel nauseated when you think of those things. Then we can escalate to the story of a guy named Sam Brenton. Sam Brenton is an outspoken gay activist, and his family were itinerant preachers in a Southern Baptist organization. His parents found out that he was gay. And
Wait, he was an anti-gay activist?
No, he's an activist for gay and trans people
okay,
now.
Sorry.
He was just a young boy at the time. He was a teenager. He tells the story and says that someone brought a Playboy magazine into their little enclave, one of the boys, and he was very proud that he didn't have any feelings when he looked at it. He thought it was because he was so righteous. His father didn't see it that way, and his father started physically abusing him. He would be taken to the doctor, and the doctor would be told that he fell down the stairs again. So he had bruises and contusions and, sprains and eventually broken bones. His mother got so desperate, she asked around the community, and they said, there are people who can fix that. So they took him to a, quote, doctor who started this program.
Wait, people can fix the son, not the father.
Exactly, yeah.
So
they said, he can fix the homosexuality in your son. So they took him to this place, and Sam thought it was going to be nice because it was in a nice office, and it looked clean, and it looked medical, and he thought, well, this will be better than what's happening to me now, I guess. The man started by telling him, you have AIDS, and you're the last gay person God hasn't killed with AIDS. He's 14 or whatever. He said, so we need to fix you so that God will cure your AIDS. That's what they started with. It then escalated to putting blocks of ice on his hands while he looked at same-sex images. It didn't destroy his flesh, but it hurts really badly. That didn't work, so a while later they wrapped coils of copper wire around his hands and attached that to a car battery, and each time he looked at same-sex images on a screen, they would attach it to the car battery and heat it up to the point that it hurt very badly. They did this over and over and over again for hours at a time. When that didn't work, they then inserted needles under his fingernails and attached that to the car battery and electrocuted him. What came out of all this torture, and imagine the mother is sitting in the hallway listening to her son scream and beg to be let out. That shows you the power of homophobia, that it would go against even that parental instinct to protect your own child. He's doing well, but he still has a lot of issues. He graduated from MIT with a degree in nuclear engineering. He speaks several languages. He has successful relationships with men. He's not heterosexual. That doesn't make you heterosexual. But he says, I have to have a suicide hotline number around my house at all times. My friends know that I'm suicidal at times. He also said something I find interesting, which is that all these years later, if a man walks up and shakes his hand, or if a friend who's male hugs him, he said, I have to do this mental trick where I trick myself into thinking, I'm hugging him. I'm doing this to myself. Because now and again, he'll have a flashback to the pain that he felt when they tortured him. And he said, if I don't do that and I have a flashback, I may build a new association which will lead me to not ever be able to make human contact again. So even though he hasn't succeeded in killing himself, he's been damaged from this process. And I think we need to ban it outright.
I have a couple of questions, and hopefully they're yes or no questions. These people that did this terrible thing, there's no evidence that those methods would work. It's not like they had done that. So I don't know where they came up with that idea that that would work.
I don't know the origin story. They probably read a book about Pavlov.
Or they just made it up.
Yeah.
Let's torture a gay kid. Gay conversion therapy banning notwithstanding, what they did was illegal under any state law.
Right, right.
So you're telling me it's protected under gay conversion therapy?
I don't know the rest of his origin story, unfortunately.
But wherever they were in whatever state, if gay conversion therapy isn't banned, is that a license to torture? And call it gay conversion therapy?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, on that level, it's already banned, right? And they're still doing it.
Unless you can call it gay conversion therapy and get away with it.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that still torturing a child is, there are other laws against that.
There are, right.
But maybe they could make the argument it was protected under religious rights or something. I don't know.
And you're telling this story, and people will think, oh, that's horrible, but I'm sure most are like the camping in the woods or, you just good enough brotherly love and watching football is more the story. But that is really not more the story, is it? There are these, you can tell me, but
there's
not
even worse
uncommon
places than what Sam went through. One of them was in South Africa at a place called Echo Wild Game Rangers Camp, which was one of these toughen up your son camps. So it wasn't specifically a gay conversion therapy camp, but many people would take their sons there if they felt they were too effeminate. So it harbors the space in between.
Okay.
One young man that was taken there at the tender age of something like 14 or 15 by his parents was Raymond Buys. Raymond Buys he had a few issues that his parents didn't deal with well. One of them was he had some learning difficulties that were unaddressed. He also had some behavioral issues, but mostly his parents were concerned that he was too effeminate. So they took him to this camp to toughen him up, and he was supposed to stay there for several months. While he was there, he was chained to his bed. He was beaten with pipes. He was not fed, sometimes for days at a time. He was forced to eat his own fecal matter. He had a pillowcase put over his head for days at a time, and he was shocked with a cattle prod. For some reason, they just thought torturing him would be the best thing to do. They would then let him out and make him toil in the fields, all under the auspices of toughening him up. They eventually had to rush him to the emergency room. They said that he was dehydrated, or malnourished, dehydrated. He had several broken bones. He was unconscious, and he sort of lingered in the hospital for a few days and died of his injuries. This caused a firestorm of controversy across South Africa. We got to get to the bottom of this. What is this crazy camp they're sending these kids to? It turns out 2 other young men had died over the last several years before Raymond did. Both of those were deemed heart attacks. These were boys who were in their teens, maybe early 20s. There's really no reason to believe there would be heart attacks happening in people that young. They exhumed the bodies and found out they had died of asphyxiation. They had been strangled to death. So Alex de Coker was the man who, this monster that ran this camp. He was arrested, charged with all kinds of horrible crimes, and then he was given this slap on the wrist and allowed to go home. Well, South Africans weren't having it. There was an uprising. So they ended up re-sentencing him to a very long prison sentence. But of course, that doesn't bring the boys back. So in some cases, we're talking about people feeling guilty because of their religious beliefs, and then we go all the way to the point of torture and maybe even death. If this were any other group of people, there would be an uprising in the streets. I'm convinced of that.
I hope you haven't heard the slogan, better dead than gay, though. So like that's better that. Have you heard that? No? Good.
I haven't heard that, but it doesn't shock me in the least, because I think some people would feel that way.
Is there something that you want to say, if people can find help in their community if they're struggling, or
Absolutely.
I don't know if every state has something, how they can reach out?
I've got one name, PFLAG. It stands for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And there are hundreds of PFLAG organizations across the country. If you live in my home state of California, as I say, you can throw a rock and hit one. They're kind of everywhere. It's great. If you go to some place like Mississippi, Oklahoma, Texas, you might have a more difficult time. I think Mississippi has 3 in the entire state. But that doesn't mean you can't start your own chapter of PFLAG. Someone asked me when I gave the talk in San Francisco, he was sort of sitting in the front with his arms crossed, scowling at me the whole time, which is fine. But afterwards he said, I don't understand what PFLAG has to do with this. And I said, well, it's parents and friends of lesbians and gays. Who's taking them to these places? Parents. Who should be saving them? The parents and their friends. And who's it happening to? Lesbians and gays. I could add on trans people now as well. So I think the first place to start is find a PFLAG chapter. They're wonderful organizations where parents and friends and lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender people can come together and show each other support and also strategize to protect themselves and others from these kinds of people.
What if you're unfortunately living a total hidden life in deep depression? And
that's what the internet's for. That's one of the good things about social media and the internet is I would advocate for that or advise that person to get online, find a PFLAG chapter somewhere and start communicating with people within it. Of course, the cyber connection isn't quite as great as in meat space, as they say, but it's something. And, imagine some kid growing up in the 1950s being gay in some podunk town in Iowa or whatever. It must have been absolutely torturous for that person. Now we have the internet where you can find a group for anything. So I think PFLAG is the best organization we have right now that can help fight against these. They're large, they're a professional organization, and they can fight against these very large gay conversion therapy organizations until the last one is eradicated and until people don't want them anymore.
All right. Sheldon Helms, professor of psychology and outspoken critic of gay conversion therapy, the whole paradigm. Thank you very much. It's been very informative, and I hope people will reach out to me, and I will try and forward them some more information. I'm at 502conversations@gmail.com. This has been 502 Conversations. My guest, Sheldon Helms.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great conversation.
Thanks.